Welcome back to the On Life podcast. Today is a very special episode because we are celebrating Veterans Day. Now, we understand that we have a lot of online students out there as well as alum that are either currently serving in the military or have served in the military. And we thought, what a great way just to celebrate you guys than to focus a whole episode on this topic and learn a little bit more about kind of what you guys go through and even how school kind of ties into all that. So we're really looking forward to talking about this, Robin. Who do we have today to talk with?
Well, I am honored to be able to introduce to you all Greg Dowell. He is the Senior Vice President of LU1. So, Greg, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, would you just start us off? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to Liberty.
Okay. I am happily married to Mary Dowell, who is a professor here in the nursing department. And we've been married for 46 years. We have 5 children, 19 grandkids. And we were just talking about the children. So the youngest is about 3 months old. I served in the military right out of high school.
Okay.
I went in probably about 10 days after I graduated.
Wow.
I got my mother. I went in at 17, so I got my mother to sign the paperwork for me while she was sleeping, getting ready to go to work. So I just sort of snuck in. But I served 4 years enlisted, and then got out, went to college, and then came here for seminary, working toward the Air Force chaplaincy, and then I went back in. Cool. As a commissioned officer. So that's my military service. Part of it. My wife was an aircraft electrician, and she served at Seymour Johnson and also at Ramstein. I did most of my service at Ramstein and Chanute, which Chanute's closed, but a lot of the folks that are out there will probably remember Chanute and also Ramstein Air Base. Okay. It was USAFE headquarters, so it was interesting working there. And so when I, like I was saying, I got out, came back in, and I wanted to work toward the Air Force chaplaincy, so that brought me to Liberty. And it brought me here in 1988. Came here to work on a Master of Divinity, and then was asked if I would consider being on staff. And I started out as the Associate Dean of Men in Student Affairs, and worked my way up to Dean of Students. And so I was Dean of Students in the 90s. Okay. And I left for a while, and then I was asked if I would come back, and then I came back as Vice President for, it was diversity and equity at the time. And we could talk about those terms because, they sort of get a black eye, taking a beating over time. But what we do in LU1 is different than your traditional diversity, equity, and inclusion. We do biblical diversity, equity, and inclusion because we believe that all 3 of those terms are biblical terms. They're, God is equitable. God is diverse. I mean, as we can see in the population, and also He's inclusive. Whosoever will may come, and so that's what we champion here, based on John chapter 17. We believe that Jesus' high priestly prayer, He was praying to the Father that all the disciples and every disciple of the Lord's would be one as they are one. And so that's why we named it LU1, because we believe that that begins here. Training champions for Christ. As a champion, you should be one with all believers to start with that. He says, as much as lies in you, live at peace with all men, especially those of the household of faith. And so this is ground zero. And because we're sending out champions. And now, from what you guys are doing as well, you're working with the online population. There's hundreds of, 130,000 online students. If we can spread that message to the online population too, it gives us great reach. So that's why I'm excited to be here today.
Cool. So maybe just to kind of kick us off, what does Veterans Day mean to you, and how do you reflect on your service during a day like Veterans Day?
I'll start with the last part
Yeah.
The thing, I know it happens, and we celebrate it, but probably like a lot of other veterans, we get special, benefits at restaurants and things like that, but we don't take advantage of it that much, and possibly because we were serving. We weren't serving for the money. We weren't serving for the glory. We were just serving our country. So it is actually a little uncomfortable being recognized. I mean, when you're flying or you're going someplace and they recognize that you were a veteran, many people will say, thank you for your service. Yeah. And I always felt a little uncomfortable getting that thank you for your service, because you didn't do it for the thanks. But I heard someone one time say he's come up with the answer to that, that comment, and that is you're worth it. And I love that. And so that's what I say now when people say, thank you for your service. I say, you were worth it. Wow. And so I get a little emotional thinking about it. But I come from a pretty staunch military background because my dad was in, my father-in-law was in. These are all Air Force guys, by the way. Father was Air Force. My father-in-law was Air Force. My mother-in-law was Air Force. My wife was Air Force. My son was Air Force. My brother is Air Force. So and then if you go back into Vietnam, World War II, actually World War I have folks in our family that served during all of this. And some died. I believe I have I haven't tracked it down. I was told this by relatives, so you got to be careful when you. But one of my uncles is said to have died at Pearl Harbor. Wow. And so, but I don't know for that as a fact. But I've seen photos of him. I mean, I know he was Navy. We have a lot of Navy. I've got brothers-in-law who were in the Navy. We have Marines in our family as well. So we're really proud of just our veteran status. The fact that we did serve. I don't hold it against anybody who didn't serve because part of serving is serving those who aren't going to be serving. So. Sure. But it's a pretty neat sort of fraternity to be in, sorority, if you want to, depending on your gender. I love the fact that our leadership here, we have a lot of leaders here that have served. Our president, most notably. Yeah. Yeah, and when I heard, and this was before he came, that he had actually ascended up to the chief of chaplains, I was like, wow, we have a Liberty grad who was chief of chaplain, or is at the time chief of chaplains. There was a lot of pride in that, and that's something that your listeners, and viewers can feel proud of, is that they go to a school where, a former online student too. I mean, he was online. So actually is leading this organization now, which I think is remarkable, which means there's a possibility for them to work here and to possibly, be in leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you enlisted at 17.
I did.
So what drove you to want to do that at 17 and just to serve in the military? You mentioned your family history. Like, was it just kind of an expected or a conscious decision on your own? How did you get there?
Well, I mean, growing up with an ID card, that was part of it, because, I had an ID card, from like age 10. And so you almost don't want to give it up. You're used to the base and the activities. I mean, growing up on a military, I started elementary school in Incirlik, Turkey. You know what I mean? So that's, it's not everybody can say that. I mean, I did my elementary years in Turkey and England. And so it gave me an opportunity to sort of see the world. Yeah. We moved about every 18 to 24 months. Oh, wow. So I would use that as a middle schooler and a teenager to sort of remake yourself. Like if you didn't have the right kinds of friends here, maybe next place we go, it'll be a little bit different. And so you just get a little bit used to that environment, that life. So it was always part of my thinking that I might go in afterwards. Wasn't sure about college, whether I'd go right from high school to college. I loved sports, so I played, the high school sports and things. But then when it got closer, I took the ASVAB in my junior year, scored pretty well on it, so I knew I had options. Okay. And so that's how we did it. And then in the military, I started out as a fuel specialist. It's called POL, Petroleum Oil and Lubricants. It's not a glamorous job at all. And at Ramstein in the wintertime, and you're, fueling a C5, takes a long time, and it's very cold. It's very cold. So I said, okay, I'd like to do something else. So I cross-trained, and I was an interior electrician for a little bit while I was still looking for the right job. And then I was allowed to cross-train into history. So I became a military historian.
Oh,
that's cool.
Okay.
So that helped. I hadn't been to college yet. I had a couple college classes under my belt that I was taking extension. We didn't have LU, online at the time. But, it was University of Maryland, and Community College of the Air Force. And so I had a couple credits. And but the time as a historian, all I did was research and writing, for the base for a whole year. And we had to publish at the end of the year and stuff. And so it gave me an opportunity to sort of sharpen the academic skills as well. And so when I went into college, I knew how to do a footnote, so that it really helped. So that's what I did in my enlisted time.
Okay.
And then I got out, went to college, served in a church for a couple of years because I knew you'd have to have 2 years of experience before you go into the chaplaincy.
Oh, okay.
And so I did that. Then I enrolled at Liberty in their master's program, and so that's how it's progressed. So that's how I got there. It wasn't as planned as it probably could have been. Some people say, "Look, I'm definitely going in." I was one of those that's like, okay, whatever door is going to open. And to sort of segue into something, when I first went in, I wasn't a believer.
Okay.
I was lost as a goose in a snowstorm. So, but when I was my first assignment at Ramstein, I was invited to a church by some of the folks that were there, and they stayed on me. A guy named Sam Burkheimer, if you're out there. I went to a Rhineland Baptist church. It was in Kinsbach, West Germany, and I got saved there. And that's when the Lord sort of got a hold of my heart, set me on a direction, and so that's how that took place.
What was it like, first going into the military? I'm sure you're not surrounded by Christians, especially getting yelled at and going through training and everything. What was it like to kind of make that pivot in your life and still kind of be in that atmosphere where you're like it was awesome that you had people that were pouring into you, but like when you go back to the base and stuff, like what was that dynamic like?
Well, yeah, that's and you're talking about primarily like when I first got saved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the folks that I used to hang out with before I became a Christian. I mean, we're in Germany I got there in October. Oh. And so the sun went down, it just goes behind the clouds, and you don't see it again until like April, and so consistently. And so every Friday night, we would get not every Friday, but every other Friday because we got paid, we would get together and we'd play cards. We'd lock ourselves in a room. We'd play poker, and there'd be drinking and all this other stuff going on. Stuff I didn't do a lot of. But for the lack of anything better to do, you just sort of, and you're in the barracks, you're just going to do what pretty much everybody else is doing. And so it was a poor existence. It really was. And so I see it now as the Lord allowing me to sort of descend into just sort of darkness. And at the same time, individuals who had come to Christ, seen the light, recognizing me, like I'd be praying in the chow hall, as just everybody pray over your food and stuff. And they'd see me. So they said, okay, well, he's lost, but at least he's open. He believes in God at least, And so they stayed on me and basically pulled me out of that. Now, when I would try my best to hang out with the young airmen that knew the Lord. And so we would stay at the church. We'd clean the church. We'd play, softball or basketball or whatever. And but I'd eventually have to go back to the room, And I would try to invite my roommates to come with me and stuff. He said, "Oh, I'm I don't know whether you say I was a Christian or I'm saved." One of my roommates. And he said, "You'll get over it," And so that was his. He later was arrested for doing drugs in the room, but I never got over it. Never did. I think if what he has begun in you, he will complete. And so that's how that would go. But I didn't look forward to going back to the dorm, and I spent less and less time in the dorm. My wife was stationed. We tried to get the same base. We both wanted to go to Seymour Johnson. The Lord saw fit to send me to Germany to get saved, and to sort of grow there at that local church. And I tell people about the Jesus First Pen. When I was there, I asked the folks there. I said, "Hey, is there any way that I can get more information about this or whatever?" He says, "Well, if you write this guy in Virginia, and you send him $5, he'll send you these tapes, 4 tapes a month, because he loves the military." And so I sent him $5. Jerry Falwell Ministries sent me 2 Jesus First Pens and 4 tapes a month for 3 years.
Wow.
And so I got a chance to go to convocation. It was chapel back then. Got a chance to go to chapel, got a chance to hear B.R. Lakin preach and Curtis Hudson and all those guys, and Dr. Falwell preach. And I remember the first Sunday that I actually visited Thomas Road Baptist Church, I sat there on the second row and just wept, just wept. I said, "This is where I'm supposed to be."
Wow.
And all of that brought me to this point, and so that's how I got here too, was through the ministry. I mean, your guys' online ministry. I mean, you're getting the word out, and there will be folks that are listening and watching that will show up here one day.
Oh,
yeah, which already have, but there will be.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're in your military career. You have accepted Christ. At what point did you feel maybe a change? Because were you originally planning on just being lifelong military?
I was.
So
yeah.
what changed?
That's a good question, because it was sort of twofold. I loved the military, and so I loved my time in the military. And what I would try to do is I would put tracts on my desk, and I'd have my Bible open, and I would try to witness to people while I was there. And I wasn't able to. I mean, you talk about persecution. They put me. I told you I was in fuels at first. They put me at the corner of the base at this remote gas station. It was like a little gas station that nobody. I'd see like 2 or 3 people a day, and I'd fuel up their vehicles or whatever. And so that was their way of keeping me out of people's hair, so to speak, because I was witnessing to them all the time, trying to get them to come to church. But what I did during that time was I had this little, cassette player, and I would play those cassettes that Dr. Falwell would send. And for probably close to a year, it was 8-9 hours, sometimes during if we had some kind of an exercise going on, it'd be 12-16 hours.
Wow.
I would just sit there and listen to each one of those tapes over and over and over again. So I was being discipled, while I was doing that. And so I knew they weren't going to let me be open in serving the Lord and witnessing like I wanted to. That's what got me thinking about the chaplaincy.
Okay.
Because they've got a mandate. So they get to do it, and that's their job. So that's why I went into the chaplaincy. And I remember the first time when, I had my uniform on, and I could, I remember them telling me, "So okay, you're duty chaplain this week." Part of what you've got to do is, we expect you to go into the hospital and visit everybody. We expect you to go through the housing and try to talk to folk, and you're going to be the one doing the service on this day or that day and stuff. And I was thinking, okay, all the stuff I wanted to do.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
It was awesome. And I did. I really enjoyed going on the flight line. I took flights with some air crews, and I went to the hospital and could visit people at any stage. Some of them were military, some of them were dependents. So I was able to witness all that I wanted to. I passed out tracts in the neighborhoods. I mean, saw people get saved, and so it was really the way the Lord did it. Then as I'm doing that, that's when I got offered the position here. And so I resigned and came to do this. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. The rest is history.
The rest is history. Exactly.
What types of advice would you have maybe for someone who's considering like going into the military? Maybe they're an online student right now. I mean, we're very lucky to have an online program that's super military friendly. Yeah. What sort of advice would you have for someone like that who's like considering signing up?
I'd say do it. No, you don't want to do anything outside the will of God, obviously. If they already know the Lord as their Savior, then you've got to, I fall back on, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God. And these decisions like that, they require wisdom. The good thing about that verse, there's a lot of good things about it, but the thing that I fall back on a lot is that he says you got to ask it in faith, nothing wavering. He said, and you got to believe that God's going to give it to you. So if you believe that, then every decision you make is a wise decision. So, and you don't have to wring your hands over it. You just have to make it, because he's promised that he would give you the wisdom to make the right decision. So I would say if they've prayed about it, they've looked at the scriptures, they've seen what it says related to the wisdom, and they've asked God for that wisdom, believe that you have it, make a decision. Just make the decision. So many people don't move forward because they're stuck at the decision point. You need to go ahead and just make it. Steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. So you're not going to make a bad decision if you've asked God for that wisdom. So I would just say, step out, do it.
Cool.
Yeah. So maybe some of our students they're transitioning. They've been serving in the military. They're now going to go to civilian life. What sort of advice would you give to them for whatever level of engagement they've had in their military career? What would you how would you advise them to make the transition?
I would say you've been trained. Obviously, if you're a combat soldier, there's going to be some things. You've had leadership schools or you've done different things, but there's not going to be a one-to-one correlation, from that environment to the civilian world. But a lot of veterans have, MOSs or AFSCs that translate almost, like if I wasn't going to the chaplaincy, if I'd have stayed in fuels or POL, one of the first things I would have done was probably go to the airlines, and they all need air, they need fuel. And so it would be very easy to do that. I knew a lot of vets that started going, they would go into the GS service, they would become GS 7s, 12s, and stay in government service that way. The Postal Service is always looking for veterans. But I guess mainly I would say try to stick to something you've been trained in already, and sort of use that or take advantage of all that training that you've had. Another thing is, if you haven't used your VA education benefits, go ahead and finish up that and go as far as you can with that. The other thing goes back to what I was saying about asking God direction. I mean, God is going to tell you where you want to go. There's going to be folks that are signed up in LU Online that don't know Christ as their Savior. So at that point, you can benefit from being in a Christian, educational institution and fall back on some of what you've learned, even if you don't quite believe everything about it. Fall back on some of that, and then, work toward, finding out for yourself. Is it okay? Is this for me? Is this, should I accept Christ as my Savior? And then, that to me is foundational. I mean, if you I can't see an individual going through 4 years of education, online or residential, and not be affected by the culture, by the ideology, and the doctrine that they're getting here. Yeah. So I would say fill that, complete that process, and then take the next step. God will lead you in the next step. That's another good reason to do it. If you're unsure about what you should do, bring the Lord into that conversation, and then follow what he says.
One question we ask all of our guests, and we get a bunch of different answers for this, so it's kind of a cool question to ask. But for you, what is your, like if you had to give a word of encouragement to online students, maybe who are listening to this or watching this today, what words of encouragement would you give them today?
This for me is sort of easy, because I got a chance to work with Dr. Falwell Sr. Dr. Costin went through the thing called LUSL, Liberty University School of Lifelong Learning. That was the old, the
VHS tapes.
The VHS tapes, and then the CDs and all of that. He was so forward thinking when it came to, online education, or just, I would say, distance learning, and then now online education. But one of the things that he would always say, residentially or on his tapes or whatever, don't quit. Don't quit. He said you can tell, sort of basically the character or the measure of a person and what it takes to discourage them. And he would say, everybody's going to come up against discouragement, but don't quit. And because I told my kids, or I've told other students when I was dean of students, I said, you see this as a 4-year process. 4 years from now, you are either going to be on the graduate side or very close to it, or you're going to be where you are right now. Keep moving. Just don't quit. Just keep going. So that would be my answer to that.
Awesome. We actually had an episode this season with President Costin, and we talked all about that as far as the not quitting. And
not quitting.
It's definitely something that sometimes we kind of forget when things get hard, but we need to keep on pushing forward.
Yeah, it's easy to forget why you started.
Yeah,
it is.
When you're in the weeds of discussion boards and papers and all of that.
Exactly.
But don't give up.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for being on the show today. We really appreciate you being here.
Sharing your story with us.
You guys are very easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you. And we really appreciate you guys out there, both our online students, but also our veterans. We really do just appreciate you guys. Thank you for just all you do for us. If you have any stories, or funny or otherwise, or just something you want to add to this conversation, we would love to hear it. So let's keep the conversation going. You can email us at onlinestudentlife@liberty.edu, or you can also post on Champion Connect, which is our sort of online platform that we have. Again, we'd love to hear from you guys, so be sure to do that. All right, well, this has been another episode of the On Life Podcast.
Living in abundance wherever God puts you.